how did you become a non-feminist woman?
Well, I think, like most people, people, uh, people generally thought that feminism was just about kind of equal rights, this kind of idea of liberal feminism,
Mm-hmm.
and wasn't anything particular to do with female empowerment. Well, yes, empowerment, but not female supremacy,
Mm-hmm.
and all this kind of thing. And this is a kind of a con, really, that kind of feminism kind of hides behind. And so it's just kind of, I mean, feminism is just kind of there in the ether when you're growing up. It's kind of, yeah, it's equal rights for women, girl power, all this kind of thing. But then when you kind of get into it and you start kind of looking at feminist theory, which basically all kind of comes round to patriarchy theory, it becomes something much, much different. And I didn't go to university till I was in my early 30s. And by that time, I was becoming interested in evolutionary psychology, but I left school without any qualifications. So I, I wanted to kind of get a degree and then kind of springboard into kind of some kind of research into evolutionary psychology. And a lot of this, I did a humanities degree because I didn't, as I say, I didn't have any qualifications, so I didn't really have any. I couldn't just kind of choose to do an evolutionary psychology degree. I would have had to do something like a foundation degree or something like that, but I didn't really know about it. And I had a baby at the same time. And this course, this humanities course, was kind of chock full of Marxism and feminism, and so it actually did a lot of good, really, because I learned a lot about what feminism actually was.
Mm-hmm.
And realized then that it wasn't anything to do with equality or even particularly female empowerment or women's rights, really.
Mm-hmm.
And that it all centered on this idea of patriarchy,
Mm-hmm.
which, 20 years on, and it's coming out now kind of like basically as dismantling Western civilization, which is what it's always been.
Mm-hmm.
And the patriarchy thing is kind of like blaming the faults of civilization on men,
Mm-hmm.
which is quite handy for feminists.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, the whole kind of premise of feminism, which is what my PhD was going to be about, from an evolutionary perspective of patriarchy, is that women are um, just as responsible for patriarchal structures and hierarchies as men are. So yeah, it's I began by wanting to kind of strongman feminism in a way that could actually help women, and then I realized that if it challenged patriarchy theory, feminists weren't interested in that, and in a roundabout way, coming to also realize that feminists are not interested in women's rights, feminists are not interested in women, feminists are just interested in power, which is why they talk about it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. This, you said a lot, and it's all very interesting. Okay.
I've been studying it for kind of 20 years, I think. I think I'm probably the most foremost researcher on feminism from an evolutionary perspective.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on patriarchy? Do we live in a patriarchy? What is the patriarchy? How would you,
Well, the feminist concept of patriarchy, I've written papers on this. You can go to my kind of ResearchGate page.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Paula Wright ResearchGate, or academia.au.
Mm-hmm.
And I've published papers on this, basically looking at patriarchy from an evolutionary perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But patriarchy from a feminist perspective is what they accuse evolutionary psychologists of coming up with all the time, which is a just so story.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's the
something that
conclusion they want, in a sense. They want
yes,
to say that men are responsible and bad and have all the power.
yeah.
So they've pulled evidence to prove that. And but yeah, it's because it's a very hard concept. What is patriarchy? Is it
Well, a
just
feminist
yeah?
in anthropology, because they stole the concept from anthropology, it just means that we see that men take on kind of those important kind of roles generally in the family. They take kind of like decisions and things like that. They also kind of like, there's a lot of responsibility, there's a lot of risk that comes with those decisions, certainly in society. And in regressive, see, I've got two concepts of patriarchy in my evolutionary kind of hypothesis, which is reformed patriarchy, which is the West, and which actually facilitates something we call female choice in evolutionary psychology. And then there's unreformed patriarchy, which basically exists in very theocratic, strict countries, which represses female choice. But it's not just the men who are repressing female choice. It's the women who are repressing female choice. These women, women are more responsible for female genital mutilation in these cultures. Stepmothers absolutely abuse their stepdaughters in these countries.
But feminists would still blame all of that on men because they would say that men are the ones that benefit. But I think that's not true as well. In terms of, there's always this focus on men are the ones that benefit from monogamy and marriage and stuff. But women also benefit from this. Really, because
of course they do.
Of course they do, because they have a secure person who is responsible for the children now. Yeah.
Well, basically, marriage or pair bonds. We are a pair bonding species. If you go back to kind of what we hunter-gatherer kind of communities in Southern Africa or South America, these kinds of things, they still pair bond, and they pair bond in a serially monogamous kind of pattern, which as the West has become more egalitarian, we are doing naturally. So it appears that this what we call serially monogamous pair bonds.
It's normal for humans as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's great if you meet someone and you get a life partner and you love each other and stuff. But being forced to stay with somebody that you don't love, that you fall out of love with, and this is what the kind of 7-year itch this is about. Once a child can basically, it gets past those really very dangerous years in our evolutionary past, they would have perished. The infant mortality. You might kind of think, I've had, I might want to put my chickens in, put my eggs in a different basket, kind of.
Right.
And men do this as well. Men and women get kind of move on, and we do this, and the divorce rate in hunter-gatherer societies is around 50%, which is what now in egalitarian societies is about what it's settling at now. So people think it's a crisis that we're that the divorce rate is 50%, that it's so high.
But it's normal.
But it's actually what seems to be our human nature naturally expressing itself in an egalitarian, because we call them egalitarian hunter-gatherers because there's no kind of pressure, like a religious pressure to stay in this pair bond, or on virginity or these kinds of things. People kind of just up and kind of say,
okay, so this is what I don't know how to define it, but I guess this is what I think of when they say patriarchy. The pressure to stay together, pressure on virginity. So all of these sort of religious influences, this is how I believe. This is the only thing I could say that feminists would be correct if they're talking about when they name something as patriarchy or...
In an unreformed patriarchy, they kind of create kind of codes, cultural codes that can facilitate, certainly, female oppression.
Right, but I wouldn't say that it is caused by men or that it is only female oppression, but I can understand how you could define such a culture as oppressive to the individual.
As what I would call an unreformed patriarchy.
Right.
Yes, and it's no kind of what we would say in evolution, these are all kind of ecologically determined, not biologically determined, not or anything like that. The ecology that we find ourselves kind of living in.
Mm-hmm.
If resources are scarce, life is hard.
Right.
And we have the benefit now of living in the northern temperate climes,
right.
which is probably a great place to live.
Mm-hmm.
There's no kind of shortage. We no longer now, because of technology,
right.
have to go and find our own food, our own clean water.
Right.
We have things like antibiotics.
Right. But under those conditions, if you don't do what is required, then you simply don't survive. And so it can be said that I think nature has chosen the structure of society more so than we did. And so that has to be acknowledged.
It's what you would say, culture is downstream of biology, is downstream of evolution. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So I think that is a mistake that feminists make a lot by trying to blame humans, whether men or women, but they blame men. But trying to blame humans for the structure of society when, yes, the structure of society can be chosen under conditions where we have abundant resources and so on. However, under conditions where we do not have abundant resources, the structure of society is, you will not survive if you do not structure society in certain ways. Yeah. And so it is influenced by nature, and that has happened historically.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that's what we call evolutionary ecology, basically. And ecologies kind of shape the environments, that shape the culture, that, and that we can then find a niche within these environments that we can either survive or not within. And, northern temperate climes are much easier to survive in, certainly when we're 10,000 years past the Ice Age,
Okay, so what is your opinion on traditional gender roles?
I don't know what you mean by traditional.
Okay, that's hard, yes.
It's kind of
I suppose,
like the stereotype threat.
If I'm to define it, I think that would just be the idea that men are more responsible for providing, while women are more responsible for with the childcare. So many people see it differently, but I think the traditional gender role of woman has always been, let's say, closer to children. And I personally don't think it has been like that she cannot do anything else, but I think it's been closer to children.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the male traditional gender role has been that he's responsible for providing. Even, he's the one who would get blamed if
Well, it's like I've written before. Women are attracted to men who have power and resources. Okay, and that they're not attracted to deadbeats.
Right. I know it's horrible. It's horrible. I always say this is the question on hypergamy. Actually, do you believe hypergamy is real? Now,
not in the sense. Sorry, my dog's trying to get in. Not in the sense that MRAs and the red pill talk about it.
Right, I agree.
Because they are kind of focused purely on female hypergamy, which, yes, has a kind of social element. Again, from an evolutionary perspective, male are just as hypergamous, but they're looking at genetic resources. They're looking at genetic, they're always looking for especially people in the red pill. And
so they've honed in on something that may be existing in women, but they focus on it too much. To say it is just,
but they just don't see there's no yin without the yang,
right?
Basically, in nature at all, so yes, evolution kind of means that women are attracted to men who have power and resources, and which is why men kind of covet power and resources, because they want to be attracted. They want to be found attractive by the best, most beautiful, youngest mates.
That's interesting.
So they're hypergamous as well. They're looking for genetic quality,
which is why women are so into fashion and makeup and stuff like this.
Yeah, they're competing. Women are competing with other women to get those guys.
Right, and the funny thing is that
competing in status games for those best women to kind of see them and notice them.
Many women say they like makeup and clothes and stuff not for men, and I would say the same, in that I'm
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
relationship. I don't need a husband or anything like that. I don't deal with makeup, but I like fashion. I like dressing. I like clothes and stuff. And so I don't, obviously, I'm not doing it for men. But yeah, so the thing is that it's in us. We
Yes.
like this. We like to make ourselves
Yes.
look pretty. And I suppose for men, they also like things that makes them, that somehow will make them attractive. And that's an
Yes, I
interesting.
mean, the sexes have, in effect, shaped the bodies and psychologies of the opposite sex by choosing, particularly the individuals with those traits. So then those traits are then, expanded into the next generations.
Okay.
Yeah. So if women, feminists don't want, men who are good resource keepers, masculine, they're going to have to stop women having sex and having babies with them.
Our genetics, in a sense, you're saying, could be shaped by what it is the other person wants because they're choosing
human
that.
nature. It's not particularly genetic. I mean, genetics is.
No, but our instincts. Our instincts are controlled by, let's say,
what women want. Basically. Yeah, the sex is basically it's again yin and yang. We value, what the other sex finds attractive.
Right, and I find that that's really interesting that you in a sense tied it to possibly genetics in that it is passed on these traits.
It is genetic, but I mean it goes back so far because it's in other species as well.
Right, I never thought that, but I did notice. I also made a video, and I did notice. I'm saying, this whole thing where the in the MRA world and also in the whole world now on the internet, people are saying, men are the providers and the protectors, and women just men like them for how they look, and they've sort of put this sort of, and I'm like, yeah, maybe this has some truth to it, maybe, but the thing is that as humans, you don't need to know this because you already have instincts, and that's what I was trying to say. From my perspective, I don't need to know that men are into looks. I already have my own instincts to tell me how to,
So it's kind of like the stereotypes. It's kind of stereotypes are actually quite accurate, right? Regardless of what feminists and social scientists kind of relying on social constructionism say, they are actually quite accurate. And like men, the stereotype of men and masculinity, the stereotype, but it doesn't. Evolution. The thing that people don't understand about evolution is that variation is the engine of evolution. So it's not pushing every organism to do these things. Some will fail, some will succeed.
Right.
Now, I think that's probably one of the reasons why leftists and feminists can't really deal with feminism, because evolution basically does dictate that there are winners and losers, and it's not a level playing field. We're all born with evolutionary endowments that kind of give us certain strengths, certain weaknesses, and it's about us as individuals to find what works within the environment, again, that we find ourselves within.
Right.
And obviously a lot of selection pressures, evolutionary selection pressures, we don't battle against them very much in the West. We're basically living something called ecological release. Like, say, we don't have to look for our water, we don't have to food, all this kind of thing.
Right.
And to some degree, we might have kind of gone past the pinnacle of that, because at the minute it seems like we're like kind of provisioned apes in a zoo that kind of like get depressed and start banging their heads against the wall and self-harming, and because in the absence of actual selection pressures, healthy selection pressures, like healthy competition, which feminism again doesn't value. It tries to kind of level playing fields, tries to kind of get rid of all competition. In the absence of those healthy selection pressures, we're creating our own. We're creating ridiculous problems that are imagined. Like gender theory, trans theory.
Right.
We are. I think basically it's a pathology that's coming from basically, because we are just basically provisioned animals now, and we've got nothing to kind of like to healthily battle against that, to keep the kind of the knife sharp.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what is your take on intersectionality?
Well, intersectionality, that kind of snuck up on me, actually.
Yeah.
Because I was more kind of looking at the radical feminist kind of thing, and the fake equity feminist kind of thing.
Right.
During the time about 2014.
Right.
About the time of the first Gamergate.
Right. Right. So this is me as well. We have a similar one. And I wasn't.
So there was a feminist called Anita Sarkeesian.
Yeah.
Who was trying to kind of demonize all kind of games, and I was a gamer. I kind of like I played Grand Theft Auto 3 for 6 months as I nursed my baby on the sofa and stuff like that, and he's come out pretty well, and I kind of learned to play on the original Tomb Raiders, and she, because Lara Croft had big boobs, didn't bother me at all, didn't make me feel pressed or anything like that, but she kind of came out and tried to kind of link all of these things to it's kind of like a tree of oppression. It kind of like starts with little catcalling or something like that. Like say catcalling on the bottom, and it ends up in rape culture. Right? They're all linked in the kind of feminist kind of universe. And it again, it internally seems to be valid, but in the real world,
no, it's just not that simple. They focus too much on one thing and then create a whole lot of
But I've done a lot of research in the last few years on intersectionality from obviously because it originated in Harvard Law School with Derek Bell and Kimberly Crenshaw, I'm sure you know. And it took elements of Black radical feminism, Marxist feminism. But I mean, Derek Bell wasn't a materialist, but he wasn't a Marxist. But what they did do is, because they were lawyers, they looked specifically at the US Constitution, and to develop ways of undermining that Constitution, as if kind of like Audre Lorde, you can't dismantle the master's house with the master's tools. But actually, they've been doing pretty well with that. Basically, they've changed in the last 3 or 4 years with. Under Biden, of course, they have taken kind of a lot of. They've undermined the Constitution a lot, basically. So that's kind of where we are there. So intersectionality is always about, very seriously, and it became wildly popular.
Right.
Obviously, there's a UN. It's everywhere now. It's everywhere.
Right.
But the intention of it is literally to dismantle Western civilization.
Right. Now
what it's going to be replaced with, they have no idea.
Okay. Expand upon that. The intention is to dismantle Western civilization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's to dismantle. Well, we see it now. All of the institutions, schools, and I mean, it's so deep. It's our institutions. It's the family. It's sex and gender.
It's horrible.
It's everywhere. It's
right. It's everywhere. They've put it everywhere, and they stop people from thinking when you want to dismantle it.
Intersectionality is woke is basically.
But intersectionality can be dismantled, I believe, very easily. There are many ways to dismantle intersectionality, to say that while, yes, it is true that different groups face different problems and some groups have more privilege than others, you cannot just pick the groups that you want to focus on and forget every other group, even though these groups have much more of an impact on you as an individual.
Yeah.
And you can't just pick whatever groups you want, focus on them, and then tell people exactly what to believe without allowing them to actually critique it and actually add valuable input into their theory,
Like,
and then say that this is true, this is the way it is, and that's that. You know, there are groups that people belong to, for example, whether or not you grew up with a narcissistic mother, whether or not you grew up without a father, whether or not you grew up with alcoholism in your house, or drugs in your house, or whatever. And intersectionality doesn't particularly focus on any of these groups. They just focus on the groups that you can see, and they say,
I think black women come at the top.
Yeah. Well, it depends. They have their whole thing. I don't even know. The point is that they have decided. They decide who comes where and what, and whether or not this one is privileged or disadvantaged.
It's something to be taught, isn't it?
It's ridiculous.
In nature, in life.
Exactly. How can you teach something like this? That's not how life works. You want to know whether or not people have issues or not. It's a discussion. It must be a discussion. It must be a discussion between the groups to see what issues exist, and obviously all sides are going to have issues, but they have decided this one is privileged, this one is not privileged, this is the law, and that is not right.
It's like when you're in primary school, and you're learning to write by rote. It's like you just copy things down.
Right.
You're not discussing kind of what you're doing, and this is how feminists are treating basically the population of the West.
And they're
just
teaching
copy this down and learn it.
Exactly. Just copy this down and learn it. These people are oppressed. Let me teach you now in university. You want to pass this?
And they're teaching this to 5-year-olds as well.
It's horrible. It's horrible. You want to pass this exam? Yes, you must write that. We don't want to know what you think. You don't want to know what you've experienced. We don't want to know what else there is, which is really horrible, because such discussions have to be open to input, because the world is not static. Even things like oppression and these things can never remain static. Exactly. These things change with time. The groups that are hurt
and
most
solutions.
change.
If people are not allowed to think, they're not allowed to think of solutions.
And also, you just, because they don't allow you to think or talk about it in that way, they're not allowed to come up with accuracy for what the problem is. They have completely failed to identify the problem. They have put men as privileged with respect to women without even asking men if they experience problems within society. How is that? How is that possible? It doesn't make sense. They have
a little kind of twist where they sometimes say, well, patriarchy
hurts men too. Oh my God. Patriarchy hurts men too. No, patriarchy hurts men. It probably hurts men more than women.
Life hurts people.
What?
What they're basically just saying is life. Patriarchy just kind of just called life.
Exactly.
Patriarchy
hurts men too.
Life oppresses. Patriarchy doesn't oppress.
Exactly.
There is no such thing as patriarchy.
Exactly. It's nature. It's nature.
In the West.
It's nature. It comes from nature. The oppression comes from nature. The concept that it hurts men too is just not right, because it hurts men more. It hurts men arguably more than it hurts women, because
well, again, it's not patriarchy, it's life. But a paper I co-authored in 2013 basically looked at mortality rates in very strict kind of what I would call unreformed patriarchies, and the death rates, the mortality rates of men are much higher than they are for women in those societies. I mean, women live in more misery because they live longer.
Okay. So, what do you think about gynocentrism, or the idea of a sympathy gap? Do women get more sympathy than men? Is the world centered
again,
around?
I would disagree with the conception of gynocentrism from Peter Wright. I think I was going to debate him about this years ago, and he kind of dropped out about
maybe
it.
I'm not so familiar with everything. You can probably tell me, what is his concept? What do you disagree like this?
Well, it's been a long time now, but basically, to me, my criticism of it at the time was this is just a flip of patriarchy theory. You've took patriarchy theory as a model and then said, no, it's women who oppress. So feminists are saying men oppress. Now you're saying, or gynocentrism says women oppress. Again, they're both wrong. Because it's life that oppresses and circumstances and individual kind of differences, like you're saying about family. The biggest privilege you can have as a human being is to have both parents in a stable environment and just to grow up loved in that and in that thing. It make it again. It's there's no point in blaming one sex or the other.
I agree.
Because doing that won't solve any of the problems
I
for
agree.
people that are struggling.
And it's also just not accurate. It's not men to blame or women to blame. It's just, if anything, it's nature to blame. Life. And it's just life.
Yeah. And we make life much more easier in the West because of men, because of technology. You know, people like Elon Musk, God knows, men put themselves at risk. You know, men are doing the risky jobs, building men can contribute more to the safety of women and the safety of everybody than women do,
right.
So
okay, I tend to agree there. But okay, so what do you think about the sympathy gap? Is there a sympathy gap between men and women?
Yeah, well, that again is a kind of has an evolutionary explanation. That what you find, and certainly in the historical kind of record as well, it's not women per se. It's children, all children, first kind of get more sympathy,
right?
And then it's fertile women,
right?
Okay, post-menopausal women. If you look at the kind of historical record about kind of in old wars, kind of like who would get slaughtered, and who would be made a slave, kind of that kind of thing. Well, they would kill children, very young children. They'd kill men, because obviously fighting age men. They kill non-fertile post-menopausal women, and the women they keep are the fertile ones, because obviously they're the ones that hold the future in their hands, but their wombs. Basically, societies, and certainly back then, could not survive without women.
Okay.
That kind of thing. So women are. It's not that women are more important. It's the eggs. Right. So I would call it ovocentrism.
Okay.
It's their healthy eggs.
Right.
That people are, and I mean, sympathy. Yeah, to a certain extent, yeah. But again, that's a kind of what you would say approximate emotional response to an evolutionary kind of ultimate problem.
Right.
That or expression, because it would just be really stupid for men to not care about fertile women.
Right. Right. It was the men who cared about, and the humans who cared about fertile women who survived.
I mean, and most of the men are their rivals. The same as with women. Most of the women are women's rivals. So there's always much more competition within the sex than there is between the sexes.
Right.
Which is something again that feminists just don't pay attention to.
Right. So, okay, you think that feminism and intersectionality is like destroying Western society. Could you tell me like how? Or what you think,
Well, as it's infiltrated all of our institutions. It's undermining our institutions. It's undermining the family. Undermining sex.
Right.
Particularly, it wants kind of men to be women and women to be men. Undermining, the concept of sex. It wants to, basically, it's an attack on nature, which is really stupid. Right. It's kind of like, why pick a kind of a universal law of nature,
right,
and then attack it? You're not going to win.
Right. You're not going to win because you're just going to make a bunch of mess and annoyance for society for a long time, and then eventually you'll be dead, and nature will go on. Okay, so the next question: can you tell me about your channel or your work, or like what you do? Yeah.
Well, at the minute, I'm writing a book called the Rise of Female Chauvinism, which I think kind of what you're saying about kind of people calling themselves feminists. I think feminism has empowered, a culture of feminism has empowered what I would call a female chauvinism, where women are taught from a very young age to feel superior to men. And men have been demonized, masculinity has been demonized. and women have basically been just complimented into this arena where they basically think, I don't know, the sun shines out of their arse. They can't do any wrong. They, if there were more women in politics, the world would be a better place. All this kind of nonsense. It's not based on any kind of science or evidence or anything like that. And so, what I'm looking at, if you look at what's happened in the States at the minute with Fannie Willis, there's just this year, there's just been a plethora of just very kind of what you call boss girls, DEI hires, who have, we're talking about kind of like dismantling kind of civilization, dismantling institutions, and now kind of like just being toppled down because of their own over self-confidence. So I don't think what we're seeing is what an MRA might kind of say it's misandry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of the opinion that misandry and misogyny are actually quite rare. But I grew up in a male chauvinist, time in the 70s,
right,
in the 80s,
right,
that existed. Where this kind of idea of men just by dint of being men
right,
were better than women,
right.
And that's kind of like more of and that's not. A hatred is an active thing. You hate something. A chauvinistic is more of an internal kind of passive, just state of mind. I'm better than this because I'm a man, because I'm a woman,
right?
Because it's not that I hate you; it's just that I love me more,
right?
So I'm looking at kind of like the dynamics of that. The rise of female chauvinism, which I think is evidenced, everywhere. Women are just basically believing their own press, even though they're writing it themselves, and the possible consequences of that in the future. Again, I write on my Substack, those kinds of things. I am a cartoonist. Just kind of creative kind of endeavors like that.
Okay. Okay. I have two more questions then. What do you think are the major issues that face men and women today? Like, are there gender issues? What would be the major ones?
Well, I think gender issues are made up. Again, like I said about this idea that in the absence of actual selection pressures, we're creating our own, like these provisioned like animals in a zoo. Right. We certainly need to stop the demonization of healthy competition.
Right.
We need to seriously look at DEI hires, things like that, because this is a kind of mechanism where the person doesn't even need to know that they are part of this mechanism. If you hire somebody knowing, or certainly you're hiring somebody basically just by plucking them, what you're saying, from a demographic that's not based on any kind of talent or propensity or anything like that, you are going to undermine the system that they're going into. Regardless of what you do, that system is going to eventually fail. Mm-hmm. So we need to get back to being a meritocracy. We need to start just valuing merit. Mm-hmm. About, I can only kind of think, in the West, it's more about just putting a halt on female chauvinism, because it is getting out of control, and I think it will have kind of really serious consequences for culture